Moving along, monitoring, it's a big thing, especially when you have limited resources. The commons have uh, do not have infinite renewable capacities. So if you exploit it, you are winding it down in some ways, like fisheries, unless you have set up your rules and regulation to make sure that you sustain the resource, or even in agriculture where you think irrigation and fertilizers will go on giving you yields, you may be degrading soil quality without realizing it, so crop yields may drop over time, and so on and so forth. So monitoring can include many aspects in terms of sustaining the commons. How is monitoring of the rules themselves organized? Effective monitoring is not only a matter of counting the number of guards, referees, and policemen and making sure this number is high enough. The subtleties of what these monitors actually do to monitor and enforce the rules and the incentives they face are critical. If guards in a national park are not paid well, it's not surprising that they accept bribes to look the other way when poaching is happening. This is a bit simplistic, honestly, because who actually is bribable or corruptible, if I think that's the word, depends not just on them being poor. Even very rich people can be corrupt. So saying guards can be paid a bribe because they are not paid well is somewhat naive, I would say. Nonetheless, it's often more effective to have local people as monitors. This may assure conditionally cooperative resource users that somebody is genuinely checking on the conformances of others to local rules. Okay, in urban areas, neighbors sometimes organize themselves in a neighborhood watch instead of hiring security personnel. So this had started in DC and worked well, neighborhood watch, for a long time, and obviously things are still not all well in terms of crime and so on. To understand whether monitoring will be effective, we need to understand what the incentives are for a monitor. Will a monitor be paid independent of whether the rules are broken or not? So is it the responsibility of the monitor when somebody breaks a rule? Will a monitor be affected by rule breaking? Are they local resource users themselves? Will somebody notice whether the monitor is doing his or her job or not? So monitoring the monitor himself or herself. If there is a lot of variation in harvest levels, people may not notice in the short run whether rules are broken or not. Right? So if there is enough crop yield, let's say, or fisheries to go around, people may not know, especially if it changes from year to year, to see if there is a trend in the system as well. Sometimes monitoring is so important for the functioning of the system that high investments are made in monitoring. So this is for, let's say, for gold mines or diamond mines, but here we're talking about an owner trying to monitor their own property. But in some highly productive fisheries in the Arctic, each boat has an official of the federal agency NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, on board. Each boat has a monitor on board. You can imagine how many personnel are involved. Does this sound outrageous? This is like having a police officer riding in every car to make sure drivers don't break the rules. Obviously, number of cars in general would be much higher than the number of fishing boats. Nonetheless, the analogy holds. What about all the official and unofficial referees, such as the general public during a football match? So whether you're watching on TV or in the arena, the referee is doing his job and the players are already battling the referees, then the people are shouting their own decisions about the referee being right or wrong or having missed a call and so on and so forth, right? So next step is then to have graduated sanctions. This, I think you know what it means. People make errors. When you make a mistake, you get a warning. If you keep bullying a player of the other team, you may receive a yellow card, and if you continue ignoring the rules, you may get sent off the field with a red card or even be expelled from the league, depending on how egregious the error is. So this is in football, but you have similar things in cricket and baseball and so on. For many action situations, there is a graduated sanctioning system. One reason is that rules are not always commonly understood or known, and getting a warning when a rule is broken may remind people of the actual rules in use. So when two players or multiple players are in the game, they are fully charged up, going after a ball or focusing on the goal of scoring a goal or preventing a goal and so on, they can kind of go overboard but and forget the rules, but it's the job of the referees to pull them up and say that's not okay. Another reason is the potentially high costs of strict enforcement. What would happen to a sport if there was strict enforcement of rules? There are norms of fair play and a tolerance of players exploring the boundaries of the formal rules. So you cannot stop the game for every little infringement of the rule of, by letter. So you keep watching how far a player goes in crossing the boundaries of the rule, the letter of the law, and then pull them up when it's harsh enough that there is a flagrant violation and the player needs to be pulled up, okay, and game needs to be stopped. Conflict resolution mechanisms are of course critical because we are talking about sustaining the commons with multiple users. The goal of conflict resolution mechanisms is to provide access to rapid, low-cost, local opportunities to resolve conflict among users or between users and officials. Rules, unlike laws of nature, have to be understood in order to be effective. The laws of nature function whether or not we understood them, right? So think of a referee in a game and a player is unhappy and he attacks the referee. That'll invoke a very, very severe penalty, maybe elimination from the game, from the league, all sorts of severe penalties, because the referees are to be protected very strictly against outrage by the players, even when a wrong call is made. Often the game is over, the outcome is decided, then one call by a referee could have been seen as a pivoting point where the game went the wrong way because a wrong call was made, and still the referee has to be protected, right? So this conflict resolution mechanism may depend on rules or on the field actions and so on. There are always situations in which participants can interpret a rule that they have jointly made in different ways. By devising simple local mechanisms to get conflicts aired immediately and resolutions that are generally known and accepted in the community, the number of conflicts that reduce trust and cost time and money can be minimized. So people want to see the game continue and not be stopped just when it's in a very exciting position, like a player is about to score and a whistle is blown that is offside, or that the defender tackled him in a wrong way, and so on, can be very frustrating for the audience and for the commercials that are, all the games are now on TV and most of the money comes from the commercials that run during the game. So they are very optimal in terms of how to maximize revenues. If individuals are going to follow rules over a long period of time, some mechanism for discussing and resolving what is or is not a rule what is or is not a rule infraction is quite necessary to the continuance of rule conformance itself. For example, within Wikipedia, there can be eruptions of editing wars, and designated editors can mediate between the different parties to resolve the conflict. Wikipedia, which is a common pool resource where people can sign up as contributors and editors, and there are some things I don't bother to go and edit certain things put up by climate scientists about who invented what, and your work is not being cited at all and it's not fair. Do you want to go in and get involved in that silly battle, or do you just say forget it, let that be on Wikipedia, and people who are not being honest know that they're not being honest, so let it be, right? Not all disputes within the US appear in front of the Supreme Court. They go through the system. Most conflicts can be resolved informally by having a good discussion in a neutral environment, arbitration, and so on. By having a drink with your colleague or neighbor, you may discover that conflict is mainly caused by a misunderstanding, in which case it will be easily resolved. When conflicts are not resolved in informal ways, more formal procedures are possible, such as through your homeowners association, your company, the court system, etc. The importance of cost-effective conflict resolution cannot be understated. Cost effectiveness is very important in terms of continued functioning of the system that is being harvested, whether it's fisheries or agriculture, water resource, health system, etc. Consider the resources can extend on litigation, not reading carefully. Consider the resources expended on litigation in the US. Litigating minor conflicts in hope of financial gain is enormously costly to society. So the entire world thinks of the US as a system that is full of lawsuits, which is generally true compared to other societies across the world. It's easy to sue somebody and go to court and hope to get money, and many times you do. There are many class action suits where you are not even explicitly part of the lawsuit, but your name is used because you bought a certain product which is defective, or you got exposed to a certain chemical, and so on and so forth. All these things are culturally dependent, but how these things get resolved depends on many things, because some problems which are called wicked problems, I have podcasts on those, do not actually have any sort of solution, so they are usually resolved, which means they have to be probably resolved again after some time, because the parties that agreed to a resolution may change their mind, or new participants may come in and not like the resolution that was made to deal with the situation, conflict resolution, and so on and so forth. So you know many examples of wicked problems. It started in the 1960s with the urban design profs at UC Berkeley, who found that people were trying to share a space and they couldn't agree on anything. So conflict resolution was made, and they termed it wicked problems. So guns, abortion, education, health care, many such things, religion, many of these things are wicked problems. Okay, so let me leave this podcast here. It's almost 12 and a half minutes. Try to keep them to 10 to 15 minutes, so we'll come back and maybe wrap up the chapter with a few more design principles for sustaining the commons. Okay, see you in the next podcast.